We're back. I'm your man, Harlan Hucky Austin, and welcome to the Electric Vibe Podcast. I'm here with my guys, Kurt Hoffman and Jay, the Electric Man, David Silva. You know, today's show is really, really special for me. Anytime I have an opportunity to interview people that I spent a lot of time with and worked with over the years, that is always a very, very special moment for me. And today I am so happy to say that we have a great friend of mine, Craig Rice. Craig, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Hucky and Kirk and JD.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure to meet you.
It really is.
It's an honor and pleasure to meet you, Craig. Really. Thanks for coming.
After all these years.
Yes,
well,
sir.
Jay, I know you got a couple things that you want to say right off the bat, so let's get right into the interview here.
I do, and I appreciate being able to go first, so this is a treat for me. So, Craig, again, thanks again for joining us today. We're very grateful for your time, and I guess I want to kick things off with the first question. You've had an incredible career. We're talking about spanning film and music and education, a very, very rich history. Can you tell our viewers and our listeners about your early life and what led you into the entertainment industry?
Wow, my early life was a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family. Hucky knows this. I have lots of brothers and sisters. There's 7 of us in the family. My mother and father were very much into art, and so it was always something that was part of our lives. And I mean, he took us to concerts. I mean, symphonic concerts when we were kids, and plays and movies. My parents were really, very, very much into movies, so there was always that. And they really believed. I don't know why they did, but they believed in kids should see adult movies and not kids movies. So they took us to, the film that really wanted me to be a director, made me want to be a director, was Salt Lake 17, which was a Billy Wilder film. Yeah, and I saw that, and I was 5 years old. And I had seen a number of pictures already before this time, so it wasn't so strange. But at a point in time, I just turned to my mom in the middle of the movie and said, "Who does this? How do they do this?" And my parents, knowing that there were directors and cameramans and so kind of how this worked, and they kind of told me, I said, "Okay, this is what I want to do when I grow up. This is what I want to do." Man. So from that point in time on, it was between everybody in my family plays an instrument. I mean, most everybody. I had a few brothers and sisters that didn't play something, but basically everybody did an instrument. So it was always about that. And so there was a music, and then there was films. And then we had, my parents, fortunately or unfortunately, bought me an overhead projector when I was like 10 years, 8 or 10 years old. And so in our basement, we set up a screen with sheets and stuff like this, something like out of Mickey Rooney. And so me and my older sister, we wrote scripts, and we had the projector so we could show images. We get kids from the neighborhood. So I was putting on directing these plays in our basement for years. And then I got seriously into high school, got into playing music. I mean, playing an instrument. Started with drums in the drum and bugle corps here, and which is the best. And I had Gary Hines was my neighbor. So Gary Hines and I grew up together of Sounds of the Blackness. So we always talked about, his was a famous jazz singer. So when I would go over there, we watch her get ready to go to work, and it was work in a club singing. So she'd be practicing and she was getting ready. And so it was like kind of the other side of, my father was a construction worker. So her nighttime was her work. And I realized that being an entertainer was work. It was like a job, and she practiced and got dressed and did this at night. And so I was always kind of involved in that, and found something interesting about that, because I know that not everybody does. And I think that helped me early on in my life, realizing that this is a job of work and not just fun and games. And so as I just started growing up, playing an instrument, ultimately settled on the bass guitar, did that professionally when I was in high school with Jimmy Frazier and a bunch of other bands, and then ultimately being around people. I really decided, as I got into high school and got done with high school, I realized that I could hear something and play it. So I have that ear to do that, but I'm not a creative musician, not nowhere near the level of Prince, but I couldn't write songs. And part of performing for me, I was always doing other people's work. And I really decided that I was going to go to college and study film, which I did do. So I went to the University of Minnesota, went to MCTC, went to Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and then I got a scholarship to go to USC Cinema School, which is where graduated from. That led me to sort of, from there, it was really just working with Bernard Eigner, who I ended up meeting, who wrote When Smells of Your Mind. So he kind of introduced me to this another level of music industry, which I didn't understand completely, but that level of publishing and songwriting. And luckily, I got, through another contact, I got to work on the wall tour for Pink Floyd in LA, which was a huge production, multiple semis, multiple media. And that introduced me to this whole level of not equipment in a van, but equipment in 14 semis, with a whole crew of people. But I tell people that's really trick to that was I was just crew, so setting up the stage, figured out how to make the build the wall and put it back up. Every time we get it set up, and Hucky can appreciate this, every time we got it set up, the band would drive up in a van with their manager and a bunch of girls, and they'd go and bang around, tear the stage apart, get back into the van with their manager and all the money, and then leave. And I said, I want to get into the van. That's what I want to do. All this lifting and toting and stuff was not something that I knew okay, there's a better way of being in the music industry, and it's that, Mm-hmm. And so, segue, I started doing some more production. I became an assistant director. The penitentiary movies, a couple of those. Then I moved to LA. It was in LA when I lived in LA, did some more work out there. Then I went to New York. We did some new dramas for television, became assistant director on Brother from Another Planet and Almost You and several other films. And that's when they called me. Al McNulty, who directed Purple Rain, called me and said, do you want to come to Minneapolis and making a movie there? And Prince, and I had known Prince only because of Andre's brother. I played with Andre's brothers, and so I knew about him. But I mean, Prince was, I just saw him. I mean, he's incredibly talented. So that's not just being incredibly talented is not enough in this business, unfortunately. And I think that's a lesson I try to tell everybody is actually learning how to really do the work of being in this business. So then once I came back here, and Purple Rain was an incredible experience, and we could talk about that a little bit more specifically. I went back to New York, did another couple films, did some TV shows. Then I started really producing new dramas for television. And then Prince and I kept talking, and to Hucky's point, and then one of his questions was, Prince called me and said that he had started the Purple Rain tour and wanted me to be his road manager. Because one good thing about what happened with me on Purple Rain, the movie, was Prince and my job was talent. It was all the musicians, all the extras, all the actors. I didn't really have to do very much more than that because that was a full-time job. It was just getting hundreds of extras together and moving them around, and also keeping track of the bands and those at the time. And everybody that was what it is. So Prince and I spent hours, just him and I alone, not even with security sometimes, just him and I. And I don't need to talk all the time, even though it doesn't sound like it now, but I can sit for hours and not speak. He says, what are you thinking about it? I said, this is great. And so when he started the tour, he called me one and said, listen, I'd like you to be the road manager for the Purple Rain tour. And I literally said, well, that's great, but I have no desire to do that. I'm going to be working on this production, And so a couple of days later, he called me back again and said, seriously, I think this would be a good opportunity for you. And I said, no, this is great. I appreciate it. And I said, no. And he called me back. It was the Monday before Thanksgiving, and I had finished the job I was doing. And he said, I really would like for you to do this. Then I said, okay, I'll be here Friday after Thanksgiving. He said, no, you'll be here tomorrow, and hung up on me. And that was it. That was it. And so from then, it's everything in my life changed from film specific to working with him on the tour. Then when we got off the tour, when I did work a little bit on Under the Cherry Moon, but it was so my thing was I wasn't going to go into this unless I could either be assistant director or some position. I wasn't going to go, and I told him I'm not going to go in there and move plane tickets around for your girlfriends. I'm not doing that. And he said, well, I want to start a record company. And I said, with Brown Mark, who was my next door neighbor, just totally, and that's why I know Hucky so well, because they would drive up in these cars and she would, when they were young, and I would just be looking out the window, looking at these guys, saying, what do they think they're doing here? But they were having a good time, and that's what being young is about. So Mark had a band called Maserati that I knew because I could hear them, obviously. So I said, okay. So I said, if I can take on a group, okay, maybe I'll do that. And then that's how Maserati got started, managed them. And then Terry and Jimmy found out that I was interested in management. And then they brought Alexander O'Neill to me. And then it started the whole ball rolling of managing artists for the next several years of my life. Some great experiences and some not so great experiences, but it was all great. I'm just talking. You guys better start asking some questions because
it's all right.
You letting you flow, man.
Right. Come on. We love it.
That's all right.
So, you know what, Craig, you had obviously mentioned Prince, and I'd like to know the first time you actually met Prince, and what were your impressions of him as both an artist and a person?
The first meeting with Prince as a person, when I at first thought he was really, really quiet. I mean, which is that's his projection. I realize that, and I know that now. He doesn't like to waste energy on people unless he feels he can get something from them, usually it's the conversation, advice, or whatever. And so then my first thing is he's really quiet, but I didn't need him. But he has been, as assistant director in Purple Rain, which is really when I really met him, I didn't need him. I know my job. I've been assistant director on several pictures. I was second assistant on this movie because I hadn't got enough hours in to be DGA, which I am now. That movie got me a DGA credit, so I got in the union. He was, to me, no different than any of the other talent that I had worked with in other pictures or TV shows. So I wasn't, I gave him his space, and maybe that's why I didn't need to talk I wasn't looking for a career with him, and that's why I could turn him down, other times. So I think that he and I just started talking. I have a real strong sense of history and cultural and anthropology. So Prince is one of the smartest people I ever met. I don't think people know that. I mean, from reading and studying and stuff like that. So we could talk about things that were not about music, which is about life and situations and what happened in the 60s with the Black Panthers. And so we could talk about that stuff. So we would have these conversations. And I think that's kind of where our relationship was. And then as that is his personality, I got to know it more. And then I remember before we first started Purple Rain, we started actually getting ready to shoot. And I was talking to Don Thorne, the cinematographer and the sound people. I told them, and I told Prince, these people have to, and now having been with Pink Floyd, I said, you're going to have to talk. We're going to have a rehearsal, not to shoot, but just have them see what a real rock band does. We're not talking about Creedence Clearwater. We're not talking about, this is kind of, this is Canned Heat. This is what their mind was. Because even a band like Led Zeppelin, they don't move a lot. They're just there. But black bands, actually, you really have to be prepared for an active performance, Parliament, things like that. So we did a performance in the rehearsal room, and only one of the film people showed up. And it was really sad because so when we went to First Avenue, and Prince, and I told the crew, I said, you guys don't understand. This is going to be, first of all, the volume's going to be like a jet plane. And second of all, you're not going to be able to shoot him like you're shooting some kind of Broadway musical. He's going to be all over the place. So we started that whole thing. And I had already seen his show that he was going to do. And I'm telling them, you guys, that they didn't want to believe it because they're Hollywood. They thought they knew everything. And once Prince took off, he gave one of the best performances I've ever seen anybody do. He was all over the place. He was down. Cameron, I was on with Roy, so I was on a headset with Roy Bennett. So Roy and I were talking. I was on the floor. He was up in the booth, and I was like saying, we could just see the camera just throwing up their hands. They couldn't follow him. They couldn't focus. They couldn't do anything. So we had to stop. We had to stop for days to restage the whole thing, get these guys up, got rid of equipment, brought in new equipment. So what I thought about Prince, I said, he has combined everything that James Brown, Jackie Wilson had learned to do on stage. And I mean, learned to do. It was a nonstop performance for an audience, not profiling, not ego. It was all a performance of another level. And that's when I realized he's not just a musician. He's an entertainer. He is a producer, and he's one of a kind.
Craig, this is so fascinating, especially about Pink Floyd. I know Kurt had a couple questions there. I never knew you had spent any time with Pink Floyd. Kurt, do you have questions regarding that?
Yeah. So how did you get the contact how did that opportunity come to you?
I went to USC, so I went to school within a very sound sounds. I mean, at the time he was a student, but became a professional sound. I actually got an Oscar for Dancing for the Wolves. So he was a friend of mine, and
Oh, wow.
he got called for this, and he said, "You know music," because everybody kind of, when you're in school, everybody talks about what they did. He said, "You know music and you know film. They're looking for somebody who is multifaceted, who understands music and understands film, because the Pink Floyd tour was your video. They had the automation and hydraulics and all that stuff, and so
crazy.
that's how I got tapped in. And so he started rehearsals in September in Culver City Studios. We did that, and we didn't perform until December. So it was all those months of just staging, because it was how to build the wall and how to get the pigs to fly and the hydraulics to come up, because we had a hydraulic stage at the time. So it was all this technology. So as I was there, because most of the people that were there were from England, and I realized that's why England doesn't have a space race, because they're too busy doing concert shit. Lasers, and I mean, it was just amazing. That's how I got to it. I play my position. I don't have I don't have an ego like some people. I just play my position. So you tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. And that's not about me. It's about the overall production. And again, I think it all goes back to Gary Hines' mother. That I watched her go to work.
Okay. So given the personal dynamics of the band at that time, Roger Waters was basically the focal point of this whole thing. What was that experience like for you? Did you interact with any of the band members regarding?
He and his road manager were the only ones that really did any. I mean, they were this focal point. I won't say they didn't do anything. They're the only ones that really kind of made decisions to talk to you, because it was their show. And again, this was 19. The show was in the 79, 80. So this was at the beginning of the height of it. They had never done the tour before, so they were just figuring it out. And so it was really at that point in time, I respected him, because he was really. I had played in other bands, and bands that had record deals and stuff like that, and had managers, but I never met anybody who was really sort of an artist. I had been, the other thing that people don't know, but I worked, when I was in high school, I got a job working at the Labor Temple during the light shows for a company called Community News, which was a light show company that did behind. So I did Tip Beck and when you brought and Grateful Dead and Minnie Riperton and Velvet Underground, and I did lights for all these major bands. Or major groups, I should say. So I had to, I did Led Zeppelin, say Grateful Dead. I did 4 shows with Grateful Dead. So what happens is, how bands work, but they don't work like where one person is kind of like the visionary. And again, I know that's part of the issues with. I do know that now, but I didn't know that at the time. That Roger Waters was so much the creative genius and created sort of a tension in the band. But I was just looking at somebody who could. That crystal clear, which parallels to where Prince was at.
Well, he gave the band the ultimatum back then. He says, okay, my final project with you is going to be one of the two, and you get to choose which one you want. That was The Wall, or what later became his first solo album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. And that was, which one do you guys want to work on? Because after this, it's peace out, Boy Scout. I'm done.
So for me, again, I just I sit back in the cut and just listen and pay attention and say, okay, he knows what he wants to do. And he can't handle and they were respectful. I'm not saying that there was I never saw any animosity, but again, I didn't get into the white van to drive away. I just, I saw them on stage. So the Pink Floyd was great for me. And there's actually a film about that. I'm not in the film, but there's a film about us doing that,
What was the most complex aspect of the production? Was it what were the bricks made out of? Was it a lightweight material?
Yeah, it was a lightweight material, like a heavy, like a cardboard, but it was like more like a plastic kind of cardboard. I can always call it. But because we had to put them up there and stack them. And the issue, that was the most complex, because the rest of it was video and the pigs flying and all that. That was rigging. That was rigging stuff. It was getting the hydraulics to work at the exact same time so that you could actually, because we built the wall from the bottom up from the stage, underneath the stage, so it had to come up at the same time. So if it didn't, they would tip over. So, and that was trying to get all that stuff to be perfect all the time. And the fact was, the hard part was not that we could do it once, but this was a show that had to be done 4 or 5 times. LA, New York, Chicago, and then Rome or whatever. So they had to put it.
Yeah, you went to Europe after that.
Yeah, they had to pack it up You had to be able, once we built it and it worked, then we had to pull it down, put it in the truck. And because again, you don't build this stuff out of the truck. You have to figure out, this is not going into the trucks. So that was
Right.
the other problem. And then take it out of the truck. Once you got the trucks ready to roll, you
Right.
had to pull it out, then just put it back up again. That's what took so long. That was the hard part, you know.
Hucky, by comparison, by the time you get to the complex show that's Love Sexy, and you guys had duplicates of everything, is that correct? One city would have something, or am I off on that?
I don't remember that. You
Yeah,
remember
I
that,
don't remember if
Fred?
they had duplicates for the Love Sexy tour, but I know many bands that put on such elaborate projects like this, they'll have a duplicate at the city that they're going to perform at next, ready to go, because something like that, there's so many elements that can go wrong. Were there any disasters that happened?
No,
I mean,
not once we rehearsed it and got it figured out, it didn't happen again.
Okay.
I think that if they had done more shows, maybe other than the ones they had already planned, I mean, you work towards knowing that once we figured it out, they only had these 4 or 5 shows. I think it was 5 shows. They weren't really going to do any more. So there wasn't like a regular tour where you got, 100 dates to do, because they wouldn't have survived that. I can tell you that right now. It wouldn't have, the bricks wouldn't have survived all that. The hydraulic system wouldn't have survived that, because that was all this about it was all about air pressure.
Sure.
Like missing the air pressure on one side of the wall, the whole thing would have fell over.
Bouncy castle.
Yeah, right.
So thank you so much for spending time with us. And gentlemen, thank you for indulging me, because going forward after this juggernaut experience that you had with Pink Floyd, how did that inform you going forward through further ventures? Did that shape up?
What it did was to reinforce my concept about, first of all, and Hucky knows this about me, is being pretty calm. Now, you got to be really calm and really believe that this will work out. Sometimes you got to take your time. Sometimes you let the experts do what they do.
Yep.
And Prince and I had more than one conversation, or I should say, or argument about that. It's just be calm. It'll work out, but we might be a little late. And so I think, because he knew that I had done Pink Floyd. And I said, let's just be calm. Let's do this. It'll all work out. I'll stay on top of it. I won't walk away. We'll solve every problem. And that's what I think I learned in that. And then being an assistant director on features, you learn that too, is that, okay, so there's going to be problems, but your issue is to deal with the problems, but not to freak out about them and start panicking, start throwing shit around just to try to solve it.
Right. Amazing.
Craig, the question I have is, obviously being a production assistant on Purple Rain, and Purple Rain took on a life of its own. Obviously, it became this juggernaut, and it's iconic. But with that, we've heard that there's been a bunch of conflicting stories. There was a story about John Travolta having been considered for the role, and Prince, the record company or the executives trying to move Prince out of the role of his movie. Can you shed any light on that? Is there any truth to those stories?
I personally, Al Magnolia went to school with me, so I've known Al from before he made a movie. It was always a Prince movie. Now, maybe when Blaine, I think the writer, was first doing this, he may have thought about somebody else other than Prince, but it was clear that when they got the script and Al came to Minnesota, he met the people here, and it was always about Prince. Again, Blaine did, he did Fame, and so he was he was very known for doing these things. So I can't say before Prince got into the mix, because I remember when Al told me this, I said, they're making a movie about Prince? Because not that I knew he was talented, I knew he was good, I know he'd made 3 records, but I mean, a major motion picture, I said, this is about 7 people who know who he is. They're going to make a feature film with him. So, and I had come up, but I realized that they had already committed, Al had already come to Minnesota. There was never a way that they were going to move this out of Prince's world, ever, but so.
And there's some other stories, they said Apollonia was dating David Lee Roth during the production or soon thereafter, and
that's
it's just
true.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's funny because I came in, I had just finished Brother from Another Planet right before I did Purple Rain. And so I got in right when they were, Vanity had just resigned or just quit or whatever the hell she did do, which was kind of unfortunate. So it threw them in this search for an actress. Sidney Lumet's daughter, got her name right now, was considered to be in the part, which I thought she was perfect. She was beautiful. the studios just didn't think she was, I don't know what they thought. I don't think Prince and I remember, they didn't think she was attractive enough, if you want to really know the honesty. I think they didn't see her because they were looking for more of this exotic kind of look. And I think that's why they settled on Apollonia, because sadly, I think they missed the boat because, again, Sidney Lumet's daughter is her grandmother is the singer, actress. That was to say, she's, I was can't think. I mean, you got Lena Horne.
Oh God!
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
No kidding, Craig.
Yeah. So
wow.
From a studio standpoint, it's like that. That shit will sound tough in and of itself,
No question.
You
No
missed the
doubt.
boat. Yeah.
Yeah, because her mother is Lena Horne's daughter, and so I thought that would be great, but they just. So Apollonia was given the part in a way, and I think that it was, and I don't know how much Prince's involvement was in that or not. I don't know that for a fact, because I know they had to have a personality connection, and obviously he came up with the name, and that's where they're at right now. Prince came up with Apollonia.
It seems like a hot topic right now. The name.
Yeah, I know it is. I know it is. And he got it out of The Godfather, so he didn't even create it.
Hey, Craig, the next question I have is, it's like, so I'm trying to remember if I met you down at the shooting at Purple Rain at First Avenue or as Art Brown's neighbor. But anyways,
I met you at Mark's house because I lived next door on the second floor, so I could look down.
I just didn't know if it was before Purple Rain started shooting or after.
I was before, because we moved back. I moved here to Minneapolis for a job before Purple Rain, even though I still was working in New York. So I came back before Purple Rain. So I think I spent the whole winter, spring in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And then I went to New York right before July, and then did the 3 TV movies, and then did Brother of Another Planet, and then in October, November, I came back to do Purple Rain. I was working pretty steady then. So
what I wanted to do is I actually want to kind of go back, because it's a couple of things that I remember about the shooting of Purple Rain. Number one, it was cold. I feel like that was like one of the coldest winters ever.
It was
freezing cold. But Craig, I just remember you as the guy that had to round all these guys up to get them down to the set early in the morning. I remember hearing some stories about Morris and other people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, part of it, what happened was, and that kind of got, because as assistant director, your job is usually talent, extras, not necessarily major talent. Usually you don't are not responsible for major talent, and doing all the paperwork for how to film, paying, making sure how many people get paid and all that stuff. That's what assistant director does. And so I couldn't get the credit on the film because I wasn't in DJ, everybody else was. But what happened was, when we first started, the first day we shot, we were, in one day we were 3 days behind shooting. So it's like, they ended up getting rid of the first AD, and it really wasn't his fault. Al had never made a feature before. They had kind of approached how much needed to be done. And the group, these are rogue dogs running around. Where's Morris? And literally, they assigned me. Al knew that I had been a musician. Find them, coordinate them, until my responsibility came to all the talent, from Andre and anybody that was on camera. The actors. Clarence Williams III. So I was responsible for all talent, and then all the extras. Like, we had 300 some extras that sometimes for weeks on end. So it's getting them, selecting them, paying them, all that stuff. So that was my job. And they took away some of the paperwork stuff that I normally would do. So I love Morris to death. I think and you have to understand, Morris was kind of pissed at this time in his life with Prince. Probably because of just Terry and Jimmy had just got fired. And this was Prince's concept and not Morris's concept that they should be fired. It was Morris's band, supposedly, but obviously we all know how that works. So Morris had an attitude. And so, this is kind of what sort of fed some of his rebellion. And then, unfortunately, some of his frustrations turned in. And he knows that. It became sort of drugs and alcohol. And so it was really but it's also keeping track of everybody because our calls were so early. There were like some 5 o'clock in the morning calls. So part of it was I set up a system of knowing where they were all the time before we wrapped the day. So I knew where they were at night. I knew where they were on Sunday morning and Sunday. So I would keep track of them, and I had a sheet. Like, okay, so I knew what possibilities Morris had, what Brown Mark had, where would he possibly be? So when it came down, and made sure I would call them at night, before we wrapped, tell them what time. But then I'd call them at night to say, okay, you got a thing in the morning. And then I might do an early call before their set call. So they had my call, so I could make sure that even if they're an hour behind, I knew where they were and could get them to the place. And I had a driver. So they'd say, okay, Morris is at someplace in St. Paul, go get him now. Not relying on them getting there on their own. That's Jesse, which is the other, Jesse Johnson. It's like, oh my God, So, but I just figured out how to sort of, and I think that Hucky knows this too. My personality is, I'm pretty easy, but it's all about the work. And I will tell you that. And don't screw around with that because everything costs everybody something.
Right. And you were coordinating all this stuff, Craig, prior to cell phones and all this stuff. So you had your work cut out for you.
Yeah, no cell phones. Yeah, there were no cell phones and no computers.
Yeah.
But I had already made probably half a dozen films and TV shows without a copy machine even.
God. Xerox, when we called it Xerox.
It was called duplicate. It was literally
ditto machines, right? Yeah. Yeah, I still remember the smell of the ditto machines in elementary school. So, Prince was known for his incredible work ethic. We've read that he wrote When Doves Cry in like a couple of hours for the film. What was it like witnessing his creative process up close?
Well, they knew they needed a song. This is once again part of it is that work ethic. And it was they needed a song because it wasn't working. Film wasn't working, and so there was an element of it that they needed to come up with something. And I think that he had already kind of. One thing, Prince had a book, and Hucky knows this too. Prince had a book, a sort of a creative book that he carried with him, and he would have ideas. Yeah, it's like ideas and stuff like that. So I think because he was always into doves and we had them. So I think that he came up with the idea and just really sat down. And it was probably, from the time he started, it's probably about 4 hours before he was done. It's literally done. And I think it's one of the strongest songs in the film, personally. I think Purple Rain's the greatest song because I know he and I were joking one time because he wasn't so wild about it. I told him, shit, Willie Nelson could play this song, it would be a hit. That's that good of a song.
Yeah, it has that country ballad little to it. But you're sharing such wonderful stories and painting such a portrait. We really appreciate all this that you're giving us, Craig.
No, it was part of my life, So.
Craig, I want to transition now to the tour. I'm getting little bits and pieces here that help me to understand how you were able not only to manage band members, but all this entourage as well, Walk us through what that transition was like. And as you guys, and I said this when I was prepping for the show, Craig is one of the most level-headed, calm people I've ever met. And over the years, he's given me some amazing advice that a lot of it I still remember to this day. But Craig, walk us through what that transition was from filmmaking to being a tour manager on the biggest tour, arguably at that time, out on the road. And it's like, it was a machine.
Yeah, it was a machine. It was a machine.
Right, man.
I have to give a lot of credit to Alan Leeds. Alan really helped me a lot. And I knew him from the movie because he worked on the movie. So we'd hang out on the movie and talk about this. But it really how to do, what was the most effective way to do this. And so I literally take notes. I'm one of those people who always kept a journal, always would write down, write to learn kind of an approach to life. I still do it to this day. And so what it was, and I believe in the best way to work with, because having been an artist myself, is to talk to artists, honestly talk to them. And Hucky knows this too. I would have these meetings with the Revolution, meetings with Prince, meeting with the Time. Serious meetings like, okay, this is what's going on, and tell them what's going on, because sometimes they just wanted to know what was happening. Because again, and even on tour, they've all been on tour, but this is what we're doing today and why we're getting up at 9 o'clock. We're going to do something that get you dead. And because these are people who Prince really feels that they should be exposed to his music and his performance level. They shouldn't be ostracized. So it's really important that you do this. These kids, for some of them, this will be the first major. And so I would talk to, I mean, I remember having that conversation specific. This is the first time they've ever had and being involved that somebody of his stature is having a performance for you, and it's important that you partake of it. But then I would do other things. We went to see the not Kate Kennedy. When we did that thing, they got to get in a space shuttle and stuff. I would create those kinds of things. This is us. This is our life. And I've always believed that, having been around musicians, most musicians don't see this as their life. This is your life. You're going to remember this when you're too old to climb into your vet. You're going to remember we did this, we did that. And so take in these experiences, and that's kind of what I did. And for me, it was that, because as an AD specifically, and then as a director and producer, it's find the same principles. You're working with other artists, and your job is to communicate with them so they don't fall into the negative issues of, I don't know what's going on. Why am I doing this? It doesn't make any sense to me. Of course it doesn't make any sense to you. It's not supposed to make sense to you, but let me help you make sense out of this.
Yeah. Man, I'm just sitting here just like reflecting. I remember going to the space station down there, and we took these pictures, and you could have, they had the cutout where you could put your face in,
Right,
and I'm
right.
floating around space in this astronaut
Right.
suit. And Craig, I had totally forgotten about that
Yeah.
until you brought it up.
Yeah. Sally Ride was there. She did the tour. The astronaut that got killed and the thing. I mean, it was the real deal.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. It was the real deal.
And I had forgotten you guys all
Jeez.
about that until Craig brought that up. But once again, you guys having Craig, he was like my big brother. He was like the voice of reason. I remember, Craig may or may not remember this. When we got to Los Angeles, I'm just going to say everybody lost their mind.
They did.
So Prince had this idea of how he wanted everybody to look. And so my good buddy, Mark had a connection with this luxury car rental place. And the guy hooked me and Mark up. So we're both driving around in Ferraris, 318 or 308. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
And, I don't see anything wrong with a young black boy driving fast through Beverly Hills and everything like that, right? I had just fell off the turnip truck. I'm just coming from the Midwest, And I remember Craig's telling me, he said, now look, he said a couple things you need to know. This is well before Rodney King, or maybe it was after.
No, it was before Rodney King.
Yeah. So Craig gave us some real advice on what to do, because I had no idea. I was so green, guys. And Craig said, when you get pulled over, not if, but when you get pulled over, because you are, he gave us some really good advice on what to do. And I remember like, man, he don't know what he's talking about. Mark said the same thing. Sure enough, a couple of days later, we get pulled over by Beverly Hills finest. And Craig, if I wouldn't have followed the information in the direction that you gave me, I am not certain that I would be here today telling this podcast, because they got out with guns blazing. Because Craig was so calm, Craig helped me to be calm too. And I just, we explained who we were and blah, blah, blah. And it took it down like that. And next thing you know, they're asking us if we can give them tickets to the show. Then the last thing that I remember, G, I know you got a question after this, so I'll get to that. But when it was time for me to leave, and I was confused. I didn't know if I really wanted to leave. It was having an impact on my health, my family, and everything like that. And Craig, you just said about just leave that cloud and doom and just move. And that was the greatest advice ever, because I was on the fence. I was super unhappy, and I just needed to hear a voice that gave me reassurance, and that's what you've always done. And so I want to say thank you in front of our audience and in front of my guys.
Yeah. No, I tried. I tried, and even Jerome got pulled over, and I had talked to him too. I mean, you can't have, it was going to happen. I mean, young black guys and expensive exotic cars. You're going in LA, you're going to get pulled over, and the thing is,
Beverly Hills.
Yeah, in Beverly Hills. Yeah, exactly. So everybody's running around, and Knudsen, interesting enough, the guy was actually somebody I knew from here. He was from here. Yeah. Yeah, he was from Minnesota. He went out there thinking he was going to be an actor kind of thing, and got into cars in a smart way, because he got into, he could work with cars. So he got into cars on sets, cars that sit on the sets. And, when you're driving down the street, those have to be all rented cars. So he got into doing that. So he had a bunch of cars. Then he got a really great contract. They needed exotic cars for Miami Vice. Okay. But they couldn't afford them. because they got to have multiples of everything. He had this idea of taking Ferrari, I think it was a Ferrari or whatever the car was, taking those bodies and putting them on Corvettes.
Yeah.
And so that's what he did. So, and that's how he got started. And that's how he got into the exotic car thing, is that he knew the guys who make the bodies for these exotic cars. And so pretty soon, and then, LA, you are what you drive. And most of those cars are leased anyway by people who were profiling. So he got this whole business going on. And that's,
Love the backstory, Craig. You're able to fill in stuff that I never even know.
Right.
Wow.
So,
Craig, beyond Prince, you've managed some other great talents. We're talking Bobby Brown, Whitney Houston, Alexander O'Neal. Can you tell us about your philosophy and your approach to working with different artists?
First of all, each one of them is different. Alex is a different being. I was talking about Terry Lewis about this. I liked Alex personally. I think he was perhaps what had one of the greatest voices ever in singing. And there was something about the timbre of his voice that was just magical. I'm telling you, we did a show at the Hammersmith Odeon, and he lost his voice. He lost his ability to sing. They were in the middle of the show, and until he came off stage, and I was in the wings, and I said, they started tearing the theater apart. I said, you got to go back out there. He said, well, I can't sing. I said, go out there and hum the songs. And he did. And it was the timbre of his voice. It wasn't even the words. It was just the sound of his voice could keep the audience calm. So you deal with him in one way. Mark Brown, who I love, is like, he's another kind of person. Maserati was like a street gang on drugs, So that was a different way of managing them.
Wow.
Bobby, I really liked a lot. So I started with Bobby when I got Randy Phillips, who had been managed Prince for a while, and Ernie Singleton, who was head of Warner Brothers, and Al Teller, CBS. They all knew me from what I had done, and they're the ones that brought me to MCA Records. And initially, it wasn't necessarily to manage Bobby; it was just to deal with him. And I was artist relations, so it was him, Meatloaf, one other. Another artist I can't remember, Tom Petty. But 90% of my life was trying to control Bobby, because Bobby was the farm for MC Records. You know how much money he was making from that? And he had his brother, his mom was managing for a while, and then he had, it was like all over the zone. Nobody was really managing him. He was like, and my first week there, he was supposed to do a TV show, the Patti LaBelle show, and he had just started dating Whitney, and Whitney had convinced him that he didn't need to do the show. And it's like the day of the show, taping the show, and they can't find him. So I ended up Karen, who used to do advertising for Prince. I said, wow. And I called him. I said, Bobby, you don't understand. You have to do this show. You have to do this show. You committed to it. Whitney may not want you to do it. Not want to think you're wasting your time. The point is that you cannot be known in this business as a Black artist that people can't depend upon, because that shit will take you down. It happened to Sly. You say you've got to be dependable. You got to be hardworking. You're Boston kid. So don't let them think you're not, because it will start to radiate concert after concert after concert. It was the problem Alexander O'Neal had by not showing up for shows. And what I had to do when I first took him on was I had him I wrote the letters, but I had him sign all the letters that we sent to every gig he passed on and offered them a free show, because once you're known for that, the people who run these things, they don't have any mercy. I mean, this is their job. It's their kids' food. It's their sending, it's their payment for the houses. You fuck them over there. Excuse my language. They're not going to take...
No excuses needed.
We curse. So everybody is different. My issue with Whitney, as much as when Bobby decided to marry Whitney, and I'm not saying it was he loved her. He really did. I mean, loved her. And it became a situation where she always wanted to be around him, always wanted to be together. And Whitney's father, John, who I really loved, John was great for me. He didn't see how we could not manage the two of them together. I mean, because they were always together. Bobby would listen, Whitney wouldn't, unfortunately. And we know now what her root problem was her drugs. And it wasn't Bobby that got it, because Bobby was an oiler. He was more of a drinker, not drugs, but she did get him into that. It was her brothers, who I both know. They were drug dealers. And everybody, she had this Miss America, personality. Even when I got Bobby in to go to treatment at Hazleton, he was just here in Minnesota,
Yes.
She wouldn't come. She told me, I said, you can do this. I said, this way it doesn't look like you got a problem. It's like, it's Bobby's the problem. He'll take the weight and the publicity, come with
Right.
him,
Yeah.
support your husband, and you deal with this. But she didn't want to. And she didn't see that she had a problem. And it's really unfortunate. So and then she convinced Bobby that they didn't need to work. And yes, they had millions of dollars. In theory, they didn't need to work. But in reality, no woman wants a man that's not working, because Bobby not working is dangerous.
Right. Right.
Wow.
And so he quit, and that's unfortunately he had me get out of his record deal at MCA Records, and then everything kind of went sideways. But Bobby was the luckiest, hardest working, because you have to understand New Edition, because I was with them too, because they toured with Maserati. Maserati and New Edition toured together.
Wow.
So we were on
some nuggets here, guys. We're getting some real nuggets.
Yeah, so we shared the same. Oh, this is funny. The hotel or the apartments that we stayed in LA, the Maserati stayed in all the time. We stayed there. New Edition stayed there. And the DeBarges, the DeBarges stayed there. So this this apartment building was crazy. It was crazy.
Just the DeBarges alone.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah, exactly. So we knew the New Edition. We were on the road with them, and they started because they wanted to survive, which is different than most people. They knew there was only two ways out of Roxbury in Boston. It was either to be a prize fighter or prison. Okay. And none of them were big guys. So they came up with a whole nother thing. They decided to practice their asses off, and dance and won a talent contest, which got them some recognition, got them a record deal, got them on tour. And they were the hardest, luckiest working cats in America,
I don't fault them, man.
Yeah,
and,
no, they were great.
Maurice White, really helped shape them into.
Yeah, he wrote the songs, and he beat the. I've got the choreographer that worked. No, I mean, but they had to do the fucking work.
Yeah,
they had to go in there, because you were not talking about people who are organically, like Prince was organically talented. They learned how to sing, they learned how to dance, they learned how to do this stuff. It was pure hard work. And so take somebody like Bobby away from hard work, he don't know what to do. It turns inward and turns destructive.
Yeah. Craig, you've done videos for other artists as well, like Patti LaBelle
and Mavis.
Mavis too. Thank you.
Fable, and I did George Clinton. I did recently. I did Greg Grease, more recent person. I obviously did Prince's stuff, Maserati stuff, Brown Mark's stuff.
Well, Scandalous and Thieves in the Temple were two videos that you did for Prince, correct?
Yes? Yeah, I did those two for him. And I did one other one. We started one other one, but we ended up not doing it. We were going to do Electric Chair, but for whatever reason we didn't. I don't know. Again, some of these things, he just changed his mind. And then
are you serious? He would change his mind just like that?
I gotta say,
the worst change of his mind was, like, you may remember this, is that I saw Bon Jovi had just done the Unplugged for MTV, right? So I called MTV and I said, I'm telling you, Prince is probably the only person on the planet Earth that can actually do this. I mean, really do this, because, and so I convinced them, but he said he would only do it if they came to Paisley to do it. So, okay. So,
Control.
They set up, the whole crew, everybody's out there. And before he's going to go on, he changed his mind. So I said,
God, Prince Unplugged would have.
I said, Prince, what do you mean? I said, they're here. He said, well, I've been thinking about it. I don't think this thing doesn't sound like it's cool enough. I said, wait a minute, they're here. They're downstairs. I'm upstairs and they're downstairs. He said, well, I don't want to do it now. I said, you should have said this before they got on that plane. They got a whole crew down there. So, I remember that was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do, was to go down there and talk to the executive producers. Say, listen,
I can't even imagine.
He was as cool as he could be, because this cost him a lot of money. He had a whole crew of people down there. They had already set up, so it wasn't like they were like getting ready. It literally was okay. I said, okay, and I took him aside and I said, I want to talk to you about something. I said, I said, and I tried to make it as kind as, and I didn't blame Prince. Prince is an artist and he's got the right to change his mind. And again, like you said, when you're around him, you realize that that's what he does. I fell for it, but you have to go all the way until you realize that he's whatever the timber is for him, and if he changes his mind, he does it based on something that he's feeling, and it's really what he's feeling.
Mhm.
And he can't say he's wrong all the time. He may have been totally right about this. He hit the time he was doing this. He might have been right. He obviously ended up his end of his life doing it. So but so that's what that's kind of so the videos. And then I started the documentary about him in Japan, and we did Yokohama. I don't know if you came
Yeah.
to Yokohama, didn't you, Hucky?
Mhm.
Yeah. So we were shooting, and then after a while he decided, and I think it's one of the best things that we did was because Rosie was there and he was singing songs and stuff. And something shifted in his brain where he decided he didn't want to do anymore. He didn't want to do it anymore. And pretty soon he was running away from the camera and stuff like that. And to this day, I don't know what would make you, we're doing this, we're shooting right now. And we finished it. And I gave a copy of the film to Warner Brothers because they were going to distribute it. Then he didn't. He thought it's too old. You're too late. I know to this day I don't know what that meant. I didn't keep a copy to this day. I wish this is my own shit. I never did anything. I never took anything from Prince. I never kept anything from Prince that was not mine. That is the only thing that I wish I should have kept a copy of that film, because I'm telling you, the performance in Yokohama, the behind the scenes stuff that we did get, and I did get out because that whole thing, if you've ever seen the thing with him on stage playing with Rosie, that was part of the film. So that did get out there. And so
didn't Steve Purcell shoot that?
I'm going to say he put it out there, but he was, I just produced it. He was the director for it,
Okay.
Craig, it's so crazy because the clip that I seen, there's a clip floating around on YouTube, and I think it's Gilbert B, Prince, and maybe Derek running through the train station. But on the train, I remember this. He had a really good vibe. He was in a great mood. So I remember something changed.
Yeah, this is the thing, because that was a part of the film too. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened. I don't know if because what Steve did, Steve did that kind of stuff. He did the smaller stuff on the train. He did the stuff on stage rehearsals. Then we had the guy who directed the police documentary about police on stage. Because I knew we couldn't do that multi-camera with all that stuff. That's not my training. It wasn't Steve's training. So we had that, but all the other stuff was all Steve. And whatever happened, and again, none of this was a surprise to Prince. So I can't sit here and say he didn't know this was going to happen, because he knew what was going to happen. But something shifted in him. And again, I don't know. To this day, I don't know what it was, and we never talked about it. So,
You know what, Craig, the question I have is, you served as president of Paisley Park Enterprises during a very crucial time. What was the mission of the label? And what was your role in shaping its vision?
So when I got called, Harry Grossman called me, who built the building, and said, we need somebody to run this place, because that's not Harry's background. He was basically put it up, and that's what he would do. And then he called and said, and I said, okay. So I met with Prince, and I said, so you need a pilot to run this. And so the whole thing for me was, this is a stealth bomber. This is of creativity. We're going to have a crew, and we're going to have a mission, and we're going to do things. That's kind of how I set it up. And I made a 5-year business plan and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And this is every square foot of this building is going to make money. That's the first thing. So it means every square foot. And I said, and also, Prince, you cannot run this studio like it's yours. You have to run it as a business. I will give you permission as the person to tell you, you've only got a month left on your rentals. But if you don't renew that, I'm going to book around you, which we did. And he'd have to go to Sunset Sound or whatever, just like anybody else. So all this stuff was agreed upon. So we ended up booking it with other people. So, David Rifkin had an office there, and other people had offices there that were not part of Prince, but it was a regular creative business that we would ultimately do it. And then Hucky knows that I created this business in LA that rented concert equipment, because a lot of stages and rigging and stuff was, sitting in a warehouse. It's like, we're going to make money with this shit and rent it to other bands. So, New Shoes and other people would rent our equipment, because Prince didn't like to use anything that was used already, because he needed new shit. So we started that business. So when I created Paisley Park Enterprises, I realized that Paisley Park, first of all, had never been trademarked. So I had to trademark that, and we had to buy the trademark from somebody in LA who had already had the name. So that cost me some money, or cost him some money. So we trademarked the name and created the enterprise, which was the parent corporation for all his entities. So there was always under one thing, including Prince himself was a corporation, so that his payments tax-wise was different. The studio was different. The record company was the record company. The rental company was the rental company. We had a film company. It had a deal with Warner Brothers that Bruce Binkow ran. That's how we could get film projects we started. And publishing was separately, separate companies. That's what I brought to it. This kind of came, my father had been a businessman, did construction. So I understood the corporate structure and working with the accountants to best set him in a position where he could actually make money and where we weren't losing money and how we could figure out how all these entities could work. So that's what I did. Sure. But the record company really was Alan Lee's because I didn't, he had Maserati, and he did have Tony Lamont for a minute. Unfortunately, Tony passed. But he never really approached the record company that made sense to me. And he got George Clinton on there, and he got these legacy artists. Mavis was on there, but the real issue with this is that Warner Brothers had said Prince has too much trouble picking artists that actually can sell. He's not selecting them for their talent alone or the uniqueness. He just did it because he wanted to. That's why it really was something I wasn't. But Alan's got the background. Alan did a good job with what he could deal with. But, he let certain things get away. Like Ingrid Chavez went on to do other things, but he let that go. Maserati, I pulled Maserati off of Paisley and put him on Motown. It's just that and Brown Mark didn't do Paisley. He was on Motown.
Motown.
And so, and I, Prince and I talked about this. I said, and I don't think he could quite come to that part of his ego. Was I said, you could be Berry Gordy. You could be, I said, you could even be bigger than Berry Gordy. You could be Walt Disney. That's what Paisley Park could be to this day. We could have all these artists, because even Terry and Jimmy would have stayed if he could have got past that. He had writers, and what drove David Z away was he wanted David Z not to use his name, but to use Paisley Park. And David Z says, I'm not doing that. How does that help me? It helps you, but it doesn't help me. And Prince says, well, you're working with me. And no, he says, but if I work with other artists, I'm not putting Paisley Park on the thing. He's got to be, and so that's what I'm saying. That's where he could sort of, his ego got in the way of building this empire that I think he could actually have had.
Craig, I got two questions, and these are questions we weren't initially going to ask, but
this guy?
Two things. So, man, how big could Tony Lamont have been, do you think? I mean, I just remember how talented that dude was. And why do you think that Maserati didn't succeed?
Well, I can tell you, Tony could have been huge, and unfortunately, it was not meant to be for him. Unfortunately, because he genuinely had the talent, he had the personality, he had the look, he had all the goods. He really did. So that's unfortunate. Maserati's problem was there was too many Scorpios in one space. It really was. And I think that, and that was part of the problem. The other problem was alcohol.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my question that I had for you, tell us what your most cherished moment was working with Prince. One that you just really remember.
I can tell you, I did this when I was in China, when Morris and I were in China, and it's something that it's personal to me. It's probably the day I die, and I think I might have told you, Hucky, we were on, I don't know if it was Purple Rain Tour, maybe it was Purple Rain Tour. Yes, he asked, we were talking about Joni Mitchell. He loved Joni Mitchell. And, and we were talking about that. And I said, yeah, I heard her. I said, she's just another white girl with a guitar singing. So I was not impressed by her. I heard some, so he said, okay. And he walks away and calls me up. And I think we were in Houston. I remember the place. We were in Houston and we had the day off. And he calls me up and said, listen, I want Joni Mitchell's her disc. At that time, they had discs that were films, and you had to get a disc player. It was a film.
Laser disc, right?
Yeah, right, a laser disc. So he said, okay. And she had just finished one, right? And it wasn't even out on the market yet. And so he said, okay. He's like, it's like Saturday night. And he said, I want to get that. And I said, well, I'll try to reach out to Warner Brothers on Monday. He said, no, I want to get it like now. So I said, okay. So I started calling, and this was before cell phones, before computers. So, I started calling people at Warner Brothers that I knew because Prince was on Warner Brothers. So it's like, it's a little early in LA, and we were in Houston. So I'm calling people. Finally, I said, okay, said knew where it was at. It was in the warehouse in LA. So they gave me the number, called there. I told the guy, I need to get this. I said, I'll get you the money. I need that disc right now. And there was a company called Sureway, a travel company where you could they would pick up something, get on the plane with somebody, and fly to wherever you were. Film companies used them all the time for film because they didn't want to put it on something. So you basically buy a seat and somebody picks it up and flies with it, and then you take it to wherever you want it. So once I got that together, Fear Waves was on the plane. They were bringing it to Houston, so it was going to be in the morning, early in the morning at LA now, because we're talking about the middle of the night, early Sunday morning. Now that was solved. I got the discs physically. Then I had to figure out how to get a player. So I was calling Houston, which is they have blue laws in Houston at this time, which means everything's closed on Sunday. So I got at Yellow Pages and went through the Yellow Pages and started with the A's for audiovisual companies. So if I knew that they had a name, then I went to the white pages and called anybody who had an A in the middle of the night to say, do you want a company that's still on? So I finally got a guy who owned one of the companies and said, I need a laser disc. And he says, well, this is like Sunday morning. I said, I know, I need it now though. And so I said, I'll pay you whatever it is, but I need the disc player. So finally I get him to go to the shop in the middle of the night, early in the morning, I should say. Now he gets that, we get it, we bring it. But I need a system. So I called, this is interesting. I called, so I need a system with stereo and all that stuff and TV set. So I said, Chick, I need to pull the equipment out of the tour bus and set it up in his room. So Chick, we pulled the stereo system, the TV out of the tour bus. I didn't know how we're going to get it back in, but I didn't care about that. We'll get it out. We'll set it up. Got it set up. Got the laser disc working. The guy picked up the laser disc. He went back home. We guys went back to sleep. Set it up. It was running. Go to Prince's room. I said, okay, Prince. I brought him in. And I said, I got it for you. You can watch it right now. He said, no, you sit down and watch this. And he walked out of the room. He did it for me.
Yeah.
He did it for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a heck of a story. My goodness.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So everything about this was really about me, and it was so little about him. He just, this attitude that I had, he didn't like that attitude. He didn't like me discounting her and her talent. And so in that lesson, I learned I can make anything happen.
Yep.
Made it happen. I initially, because if I would have never done it for myself. Do you understand? I would have never done that for myself.
Speaking of which, we have come to learn doing our homework. Hucky knows this already, but Jay and I doing our homework that Prince wanted to actually start a college.
Yeah, he did.
And as a result of that, you ended up going to college yourself and then becoming a tenured adjunct professor.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
He had a decision. He made a decision. He wanted to start a college. He really seriously did. Except Prince has no patience.
What?
You just don't start a college. So Jack Robinson and I said, neither one of us had ever. I went to college. Jack hadn't even done that really. I said, okay. So we started talking. We met with Libby and Morris and a lot of people about how do you do this. And then, as we were doing this, we realized we had to do a curriculum. And as I was talking to President, I said, this is not just going to happen. We have to actually go through the stage. You got to have teachers. And Jack was the smart one. Jack said, there's a school called Music Tech. I'm going to go there and see how it works. So he got a job there. And then what happened was, so he was working there. Prince totally lost the illusion of this because it was taking too long. He's like, what's taking so long? Well, like life. And so Jack was there. So when I quit Bobby and Whitney, and the reason I quit Bobby and Whitney, that's the whole nother show, called up Music Tech and said, you guys, I will create a music business program for you because I can't do this anymore. No one in this business who doesn't understand business from a college, from a business level, will ever be able to survive in the music industry because it's shifting and changing. We're talking millions of dollars now. We're talking about an artist that doesn't understand publishing is dead in the water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I said, if you got to do that. So I quit Bobby and Whitney and came to work at Music Tech and wrote the curriculum, got the program accredited. I started hiring people, for this. Initially, I taught all the classes initially. Then I hired people gradually in following semesters. And Gilbert Davidson worked there, who was actually a very good teacher, surprisingly enough. I didn't think he would be, but he was great. And the kids loved him because he came in and really talked about And so they took on courses as instructors, and it really became a thing where, and then turned into music tech. Went from music tech to McNally Smith College of Music, and so I did that for almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Adding to that rich history again.
Yeah.
So, Craig, you've continued to have a distinguished career with projects like your Emmy Award nominated documentary, Half Past Autumn, and the works of Gordon Parks. What draws you to the stories and the projects that you work on?
I mean, as far as the ones that I really direct, it's about a feeling. I mean, I knew this in college. I'm not somebody who can create something. I can do business for anything that I can do. So I can produce for anything, but I have to have a vision for it. I have to see it. So when I was in college, I did a film called We Teach Our Children, which is an hour-long documentary about the desegregation of LA schools, when I was in my senior project at SC, which was nominated for an Emmy too. It's because I couldn't believe LA was not desegregated by 1980. It's like, what the hell is going on out here? So, but in anything that I've done, Half Past Autumn was something I had worked on for 5 years, but even Prince's film, I wish it would have been done, because the film I wanted to make was about him as a creative being. It wasn't about his personal life. It was his creative engine and how he approached it. I've done a number of things. So for me, it's always about a feeling from a directorial standpoint, because I have to see the film. It's the same thing with music videos. I've been asked to do other music videos by other people, but if I don't see it, then it's just a bunch of girls jumping around and dance, and I can't. That's not interesting to me. So I have to see the film. Because after I did the We Teach Our Children, once I got the nomination, I got a lot of offers to do a lot of films, like Booty Call and, Players Ball and any black films that had some music. I don't want to do this. I just told my agent, don't send me that shit anymore. I don't, you're not going to convince me to do it. Not to say as I've gotten older, because the residuals might have been really nice about now, but I can't do that. Because it's like, I don't know why you start. If you don't start from a feeling, I don't know where you start from. Just visuals, I'm not interested in that, And so that's kind of how I've always approached the directorial aspect of it, and what I wanted to do. Things that I got off the ground or didn't get off the ground were always based on that.
So currently you're working on Can't Buy Grace and developing the Black Panther series that for HBO.
Yeah. Actually, now it's Netflix. It's Netflix now. If they ever get off their ass.
Oh, Netflix.
No, it's now on Netflix. Started out on HBO. Well, that's another journey that's another show. It is now 22 years since I started that project.
Wow.
Wow. David Hilliard, who was one of the original ones, said, "Too bad you weren't part of the Black Panthers, because we'd still be around today." But it's just everybody feels that this series, it's a dramatic series, would be too problematic. Everybody said that. Every network, HBO felt that way, Oprah felt that way, Showtime felt that way. So Netflix has got it now, and they've had it now for the last 5 years, and we'll see if they ever decide to do something with it. It's interesting. I don't really think about it too much, we'll see if it happens. So that's something that I really truly believe in. And that was a conversation with Prince, actually, talking about, he didn't understand Black Panthers and what they were really about. They were self-defense. They were programs that we now are legal and in every state and school in America, or at least they are right now. We'll see. The
school
breakfast
lunches,
program,
for example.
Yeah, the breakfast programs in schools.
Right.
I mean, free health clinics, all this stuff was their thing. And that's what I wanted people there. They weren't leather jackets and shotguns. That was only for their own protection, because the United States had declared war on them. I mean, literally had a war document and killed many of the Panthers. That's what I wanted everybody to know. As smart as Prince was, he didn't understand them. So I was always dedicated to making sure people understood that. So I optioned all the Black Panthers books when I first started this, and I knew so all of them. It's just been, everybody's scared of them. They're scared of it. Now we know why. Right now we're living in
well, in an era where we're living in, where the threat of having the First Amendment being eroded, we applaud your voice and your voice wanting to be heard, and the subject such as this. So may it prosper and may it thrive.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Craig, as we start winding up, you've had an amazing career, and I think that our audience is really gonna, really love this episode. I mean, I could just listen to you for hours, and I was there most of the
Yeah,
time. So we really appreciate that. But one
Yeah.
question I have for you in closing is, what are you most proud of when you look back on your career?
Wow. Well, that's it about my whole career, not
Yeah,
just
your
with
whole
Prince.
career. Yeah,
Everything is. I did tell Prince this thing like I saw him like a couple years before he passed, but it's the truth for everybody. Is I can look everybody in the eye and say I didn't screw you over. That's really it. I mean, and that's hard to do in this business. Like I say, it's like telling you, if I'd have kept that Yokohama tape, trust me that that would have been all my kids' fun. So it's not like I haven't, don't think that way. I just was talking to people were complaining about all this stuff that's out there, auctions off about where Prince's stuff, where people obviously, liberated things when they're around here and now they're selling them. And I don't have, I no regrets. I mean, Hucky, you and I talked about this. I've never said anything that I wasn't privy to, it was not part of my life.
right.
I just don't feel that way. And I think the thing that I'm proudest about is the relationship I have with the people that I worked with.
Man, this has been amazing. I'm gonna close this out and turn
Yeah.
it over to my guys, man. But it's like what a wonderful hour and a half we've had here with you,
Yeah.
Craig, and we're hoping that you'll come back again and
Yeah, sure.
maybe tell us more about the Browns. I think
Uh,
they had a sitcom, man.
yeah, they did. Well, anything. I mean, these are just the surface stories about Prince, But Hucky, this is family. So anytime I just pick up the phone call.
Jay, turn it over
Yes.
to you, buddy.
Well, I wanted to say, Craig, thank you again very much. It's been my pleasure to meet you, and now you're part of the Electric Vibe family.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
we hope that you'll come back and see us again. Folks, if you like what you see and hear, please remember to hit that like button, give us a follow, subscribe to the Electric Vibe podcast. We're available on all major platforms. Every bit of support that you give us allows us to bring you great content like the great guest and Craig Rice that we've had today. And we really do appreciate any and all support. And before I turn it over to my brother, Kurt, I'm just going to say, remember, when the universe comes knocking, you have to answer that door. Kurt?
Thank you, Jay. Craig, once again, this has been an honor and a pleasure to have you here. You've had such a multi-dimensional, multifaceted career that it begs to have more than one episode here at the Electric Vibe. So we really appreciate you taking your time out and sharing your stories with us. And I'm just going to say this on a personal level. Can I borrow your speaking voice for one day? I know that's not the first time you've heard that. I'm this reedy Irish tenor. Man, let me tell you, that would have paid for all your kids' college funds as well. So, but just seriously, thank you so much for coming and sharing your stories. Are just again, please put this in written form in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. And of course, you have to do your own audiobook with a voice like that. Why wouldn't you? So, as I like to say when we close every episode, and Hucky, you've spoken on this numerous times. We live in complicated times, and to that I say, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Good night,
Jay.
Peace.
Thank you, guys. Thanks. Take care.